I want to talk about the texts that were just released from Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Eye roll. I totally get it. But I'm telling you, this is different. Thousands of texts, right, between himself, Arizona Rep. Andy Biggs, at least 34 other GOP lawmakers. Now, it looks like a lot of panicking, plotting to overturn the 2020 election. I have a take I have not heard anywhere else. And that's why I'm covering this, okay? Because I know there's a lot of noise about this, but they're not telling you what I think matters. The texts are absolutely proof of a problem, just not the one being exploded on the left and ignored on the right. Let me read some. Texas Congressman Brian Babin wrote, Mark, when we lose Trump, we lose our republic. Fight like hell and find a way. We're with you down here in Texas. Refuse to live under a corrupt Marxist dictatorship. Liberty! Pennsylvania Rep. Mike Kelly texted, we're in Philadelphia suing Pennsylvania Secretary of State for her illegal meddling in this election and will continue to expose fraudulent actions. Let me know if there's anything I can do to fight these MFers in Pennsylvania. Our president is heroic. Thank you for all you've done. And it goes on and on, okay? And then, of course, there's this one from Representative Ralph Norman that you're hearing a lot about, South Carolina. Mark, in seeing what's happening so quick, reading about the Dominion lawsuits, attempting to stop any meaningful investigation, we're at point of no return. Our last hope is invoking martial law. Sick. Please urge the president to do so. I need you to see the game, okay? What do these texts mean? All right, now what you're hearing they mean is that Meadows has been caught red-handed, and so have a lot of other GOPers, man. This is criminal. Now, legally, none of the real lawyers I have spoken to believe that this is some proof of a slam-dunk criminal case, that it's proof of even treason. Please. Now, is Meadows and are others guilty of political malpractice and pandering to baseless disruption of the democratic process? Well, you know the answer is yes. You knew that already. Okay? And the key to that is Democrats can't prosecute or give resolution on that issue of political malpractice. They can expose it, which they are, and you are the judge with your choices at the polls. But the idea that all this new information, it doesn't matter, it's just more noise, people get it. Sorry, I will never cave to the cynicism like that, because I actually want us to get to a better place, and that will never happen unless enough of us see the game, see what is happening and how it's played, and that we resolve to make it stop. And we can. Now, here's the proof of the premise. When one side of this party system sees a situation that they believe is proof that the other side wants to destroy the democracy, and the accused side thinks the same situation is just a protest gone a little sideways, and all the lawmakers had good faith concerns, you know you have a broken dynamic. Now, here's proof of that. Again, flip the R's and the D's, and everything flips. The outrage, the intentions, the ignoring, the denials. If the fringe right players in the GOP had texts like this about anyone on the left or in the media, it would be treason. That's what they'd be saying. Now, you can say, you're criticizing the right. That means you're a lefty. Anyone who says that is not being a critical thinker here. If you think about it, you know it's true. You flip the R and the D, you have the same kind of situation flowing in opposite directions. So the idea that one side is playing it down is part of the problem. And yes, I have a problem with the January 6th probe. I don't think investigations by politicians about the other party get us anywhere, at least not right now. And the idealism of oversight is their job. We need the facts. Look, that is too often applied opportunistically, meaning when it just works for the side that's saying it. And here's the proof of that. Show me a critical mass of members of one party going against their own. Crickets. Now, here's another point that I haven't heard made. Is there a defense to what is apparent in these text messages? And there'll be more coming out. This is just the first batch. That's how we're doing it these days. We're hitting you over the head multiple times with the same point. There is a defense that they really believed. They believed that there were real issues with the election, that there was rigging or stealing. But there'd have to be a basis that proves that. We've all heard that there were concerns, right? Isn't that the basis? No, that's an empty echo without any proof. Did they have proof? 63 cases, 62 failed. Oh, what about the other one? It was a small case in Pennsylvania about a handful of voters that shouldn't have gone back to cure when they didn't have ID. It meant nothing in the results of that state. All the other lawsuits failed, with judges that Trump picked and other people picked. None of them went anywhere. Wait a minute, I heard about affidavits from people who are nakedly and blatantly partisan, and in almost all cases, just reporting observations without any real access. They weren't officials. And yet there was near or actual hysteria from supposed sober leaders. What does that tell us? That there was a lack of anything approaching genuine curiosity. The lack of any change in intensity, despite people from their own party at the state level disrupting their suggestion. Judges that, again, they picked. It makes it very hard to see any of what's being exposed as being in good faith. The same people who say they're about country, constitution, law, and order. All of that was abandoned in pursuit of what? Advantage. Now, the left seizes on the ignorance of Representative Norman with the Marshall text. Marshall, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L. Okay? That's low fruit. Why? Because he wrote the wrong word. Marshall, that's like as in the Marshall Plan that we used to rebuild Western Europe. He meant to write Marshall, M-A-R-T-I-L, right? Comes from the Latin word for the god of war, Mars. It means military rule. Now, what does that do? Well, it feeds the perception that the right is stupid, but it also feeds the perception that the left is a bunch of condescending idiots. And my advice to the Democrats is, if you have the goods, don't just show that you're smarter, show that you're better. People are desperate for that. Now, for me, I would point out the nonchalance of how Representative Norman waves away what he was calling for in that moment. Something as un-American as martial law, based on nothing. He now says this, today. Obviously, martial law was never warranted. That text message came from a source of frustration on the heels of countless unanswered questions about the integrity of the 2020 election, without any way to slow down and examine those issues prior to the inauguration of the newly elected president. Of course you did. You ran to court. They were empty questions. You never even dug into them, apparently. So you had no reason to believe. If you did, that would be different, but you didn't. You lied, denied, and defied. Out of what? Misplaced skepticism? Gullibility at best? For too many, it was just about advantage based on this. And here's why I'm talking about this tonight. Party über alles. Party über alles. Party over everything. And yes, the reference to the poisoned aspect of the Germanic term. That's what this is about. No, not Nazism, but this corrosive idea that if it's good for the party, it's enough. That's the problem. It's always been the problem, and we can change it. This fealty to fringe partisanship risks everything. And the proof is the silence by those on the right who know it's wrong. Lindsey Graham is the poster boy, right, for swallowing his conscience out of convenience. But it runs deep, even with the former president on the wane. That's the real danger. Not what some did, but how most let it go, and just for party. That's what this is about. That's why I attack the parties. Wait a minute. This is just about the GOP. The Democrats are great, say some of you. Look, I've said it many times. I do not believe the parties are even. The Democrats are not as toxified by fringe thinking as the right. But they're part of this game, and they represent an entity, a party that is anathema to forming a more perfect union. We will never be what we can be as a nation as long as we have this binary system of division that is, by definition, zero-sum oppositional. One side only wins because they make the other side lose. And we know that because history teaches us that we've never been what we can be except in crisis, because what happens then? Parties give way to patriotism in crisis. And yes, these texts are proof that the GOP has really lost its way. And on that day, January 6th, and in the run-up, they all became, like the worst of us. They are nothing grand right now, but they are reminiscent of an old party, the GOP, the worst kind of American party, the know-nothings of the 1850s, the worst part of the progressive movement. And that's why I hope you, care about these texts and the entire process that's going on around it. It's not just more January 6th, blah, blah, or, oh, I get it, it was nuts, some lost their way, which, by the way, that's not okay for our politics. But here's why they matter. It is proof that party loyalty is tearing us apart. And the Democrats can't fix it. They can't investigate and prosecute this. I know what the Constitution says. I know what the law says. I'm talking about the politics of practicality. People don't trust it. It's not working because we know that one side just wants to destroy the other. That's how it works. And we can change it. We can step away from it. The sooner enough of you leave the parties, the sooner our election system and our government will become more about solutions to your interests and not just the interests of the parties and those in power.